Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today I want to talk about something a little bit controversial, hopefully not very controversial, but what I like to call negative adaptation. So as a little bit of background, I went to the tournament at Salon Sword Festival a couple months ago, and this person over here on the right is someone who used to be my student who I've trained with and I've taught a little bit. And this person on the left is somebody that I don't actually personally know very well, but they go to L'Art de Bellica, a club run by Patrick McCafferty, who's a pretty good friend of mine. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this person made their own video about their experience, and they talked a little bit negatively about this particular fight. And I think that it's a very, very interesting and very, very common thing to happen, which is that you go into a fight and for whatever reason, you start having a really, really bad fight. Maybe in this particular case, the person is throwing some things maybe you're not used to, throwing some techniques that you don't really think are good, or maybe the judge is giving you some bad calls. All of these things happen all the time whenever you go to tournaments. And I don't think that anyone here is like really particularly mad about it or upset. But the point here is that during this fight, what this person describes is becoming a little bit upset about what was happening and changing their fencing because they were getting upset as to what was happening. And this is what I'm calling negative adaptation. And this is something that happens in all combat sports, all of them. Boxing, Muay Thai, Olympic fencing, all of them. And the reason it happens is that there is this almost instinctual human, basically impulse, which is whenever something starts going wrong, you start changing what you're doing because, basically pattern recognizing human brain says, if something's not happening the way that I think it's supposed to, then I have to change what I'm doing so I don't get the same outcome. The problem is that doesn't really apply to fencing. If someone is doing something that you don't quite understand, the last thing you should do is change how you're fencing, because oftentimes you simply need to compartmentalize what the other person is doing in a way that you do understand and you are used to. And that way you can fence as normally and you can fence comfortably. What, however, happens a lot of the time is you start making adjustments, and more importantly, you start copying what is happening to you as an attempt to get the good result that you want. But what that actually ends up making you do is throwing techniques that you've not really practiced, you've not really comfortable with, against somebody who has practiced them and is comfortable with them. And suddenly you're playing their game, their fight, and their rules without really realizing it. So we're going to watch a couple exchanges that I think really embody what we're talking about here. And the first is an exchange where they come in close and they basically kind of just double. If we watch that again, basically it's a very short, it's a very simple exchange. And this is part of what was, I guess, a little bit unusual and upsetting to this particular person, which is that when someone just walks up to you and swings at you, it's unnerving, it's jarring. It's not how a lot of people fence, but it's something that happens and something that everyone, needs to have happen to them every once in a while, if anything, just to get used to it. So they double. This person comes in straight over the top and basically lands their Shielhao looking thing right here to the hands. It was maybe a little bit flat because it's got this kind of 45-degree angle. And then immediately after, this person comes around and hits him in the body. Double happens all the time. It is what it is. However, something more important happened here, which is that the second this happened and this person started making negative adaptations, I think they changed the way that they fenced and started doing things that they are not necessarily comfortable doing. So for this next exchange, what we see is an entirely different story. We see two people who are posturing, positioning around each other. And specifically, the person on the right here is throwing one-handed cuts to things that they see that are opening. Now, if you know how to throw one-handed cuts, there are two rules that come into play whenever you're throwing them. Rule number one, your opponent needs to be in a defensive mindset, meaning they're standing there waiting to block. And two, you need to be utilizing the fact that you are outside range to throw something that they think can't land and then kind of land it anyway. So this is basically a perfect demonstration of where, why, and how you use one-handed strikes. This person over here on the left was basically just standing outside of range, changing their guard, basically trying to do various things to provoke their opponent to attacking, and then waiting to throw that counter response. A very common method of fencing. It's how I fence. But It is vulnerable in this particular way to these one-handed cuts, particularly because if you're standing there and you're waiting to block and someone throws something that you can't block, the only thing you can do is get out of the way. And when you're in a situation where all you can do is move and not win, that's a losing situation. But this is, again, another sort of negative adaptation from before, where this person had kind of charged headlong in and just thrown a technique, and this person was a little bit shaken by that. They went full defense. This person then adapted to that full defensive mindset by throwing these, like little picky, snipey shots. And this, again, formed another negative adaptation. Specifically, that negative adaptation comes in this exchange, where the person who was just getting picked apart a little bit by some snipey moves responds from the opponent walking in and throwing their cut, same as they did the first time, with this same one-handed technique. Now, they say in the video that this is not something that they train, this is not something that they're used to, but this is a perfect example of something that you see, honestly, in like boxing and Muay Thai far more often, which is whenever someone lands something against you, it's just like this base human lizard brain instinct that you want to throw it yourself. But the reality is that because this person hasn't really practiced one-handed cuts, that they didn't throw it under the right conditions. They threw it in an instance where their opponent was coming at them full force and charging. So you know that when you go low on a target, you have to take advantage of distance. There was no distance here. They were both well within range to hit each other. And two, their opponent was not in a defensive mindset, because obviously they were attacking. And what results is this. And this is what's going to happen 9 times out of 10 when you throw a one-handed cut in a situation where you shouldn't be. So they get hit and they lose out on that exchange. But I'm firmly of the belief that this is not something done consciously by this person, because this is something that happens to everybody. Everybody, and I don't care who you are, has been in a situation where you're getting a little bit upset by the fight that you're currently having, and you're making changes to your fencing that are not beneficial. But you can't realize it then in the moment until you go back and review later, because at the time you're thinking, oh, this person is doing things that is beneficial based on the scoring system. I should do that too if I want to score points. But then suddenly you throw it and it doesn't work for you. And it perpetuates this cycle of negative reinforcement where you keep trying new things and they keep not working. And the reason they're going to keep not working is because you've never really done them before, or at least you're not used to them or comfortable with them. And then the more they don't work, the more you're going to keep making these changes and pushing yourself deeper and deeper into that spiral. So again, I'm not trying to insult anyone here or talk about anyone's quality of fencing. What I am trying to talk about here is that this is a very relatable and learnable experience that everyone has had. And if you ever find yourself, at a tournament and you find that you're getting into this spiral, the way that you need to break out of it is to go back to what you know. Go back to what you are very, very safe and secure with. Because at the end of the day, even if you keep losing these exchanges and losing this fight, because frankly, the day of the tournament is not the day where you're going to learn any new thing. You still should fence the way that you're comfortable with, because chances are you have the skills, you have the knowledge, and you have the techniques you need to overcome the situation that you're in, but only if you stick to what you have practiced. All right. Hopefully nobody's mad at me for this one, but if you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me your videos to HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.